Sustaining Creativity podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Douglas Katz, CEO and co-founder of NULU and partner in Red Leg Innovations. Please enjoy Douglas Katz. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Doug Katz, CEO and co-founder of NULU and partner in Red Leg Innovations. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very, very excited to be here.
Well, I am excited to have you join me today to chat about creativity and how that shows up in your life. But before we get there, why don't you take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
So I, as you said, am CEO and a co-founder of NULU. And we're a company that's rolling out an adaptive knife. We're finding out it's more than adaptive, but we were originally entering the market from an adaptive perspective that changes the way people think about cutting. It changes sort of the geometry of cutting, and we'll probably get into that later. I myself grew up in Michigan, but currently now live in Northwest Illinois, kind of even closer to the Wisconsin border than to Chicago. I'm a veteran, West Point graduate, and a veteran of the U.S. Army, where I served as an artillery officer. And this creativity and invention space is, I shouldn't say the creativity space is new. The invention space is new. Creativity kind of has always been in my toolkit, but trying to commercialize and monetize it and use it for positive impact is kind of my act 3. So I think hopefully that sets the table for questions.
Absolutely. My goodness. Well, let's just start and get this out of the way. I mean, not out of the way, but have it be a foundation for us. When you think of creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
God, that's great. I think it's just not having limitations, right? I think too often creativity is lumped in with something aesthetic, an art form or something like that. And I think one thing I really did learn in the military was creativity can be on, the battlefield. Creativity can be in different situations. And all it is using the resources that you have and your experience and the wisdom of the team that you're on to come up with a solution to a problem. And it doesn't have to be, I think sometimes people are like, okay, creative, it has to be this big thing. And it can be super simple. It can be, but it could just be a better way of doing things. And I think it's getting out of that status quo.
I like that. I like the not having limitations piece. And I mean, it sounds like the knife that you created is all about that.
It is. And I think I think creativity, at least in what I'm finding in the invention space, and necessity really go hand in hand, because the creativity is the problem solving aspect. And I think a lot of that, West Point does things really, really well. And one of the things they do is teach you how to think in that problem solving method. And everyone who goes there has to have some engineering background. So I think I brought that to sort of the wider, unbounded creativity of like, let's solve a problem. Let's solve it then in a way that is practical and achievable. So for me, with like the NULU, it was about, hey, I have my own upper extremity issues. I like to cook. I can't use a regular knife to the extent that I could previously. And I'm a hobbyist knifesmith, and I really couldn't even make a knife at that point, because I couldn't swing a hammer, I couldn't do a lot of stuff. So I looked and said, okay, what can I do? How can I have a creative outlet, but also solve this problem? And NULU was born.
And NULU arose from that. I love it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this invention. And so for people who are listening, what is
So
this
if you were to
knife?
think about the knife, it's been around thousands of years, And a traditional knife design is point, blade, handguard, handle, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
other parts on other knives, but basically you get the gist of it. And the point, because a knife is inherently a multitasker, a
Mm-hmm.
point allows you to stab or cut, which when knives were an essential thing that people wore, everybody had, you may have needed it for both those uses, but you don't need that in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that knife design has a linear geometry, meaning the handle and the blade are in alignment with each other on a line.
Yeah.
And what that means is to transfer force, you're going against sort of the most natural and efficient way to do it. You're putting force on your extremities, your joints, your body to transfer that force through the knife to the blade, right? The
Mm-hmm.
knife in and of itself is just a means to get the force from your body to the cutting edge.
Yeah.
That's it. Because the
Mm-hmm.
cutting edge is where the business happens. So with our knife, with the NULU, we looked at some ancient knives that have a similar geometry. But initially, I didn't. It was like, I just want to be able to work in the kitchen. And the original prototype is as primitive as it sounds. But if you think about a circular geometry
Mm.
where you engage the tool is the center of a circle, the
Mm-hmm.
blade then becomes the circumference along the outside, and anywhere that you're transferring force from your body to that business end, right, the cutting edge, becomes a radius along that circumference. That
Ah.
is efficient transfer of force. As I said in the beginning, the reason that we approached it from a adaptive perspective was
Mm-hmm.
because, right, when we were talking about creativity,
Yeah.
needs, and that the group that had similar challenges to what I do from an
Mm-hmm.
upper extremity challenges, I looked and I said, this is who will get it.
Mm.
We're we're expanding that as we're going to market a little, a little bit more hard launch versus soft launch. We've been through a Kickstarter, but so when I start bringing the circular geometry and what's what we call force transfer geometry, when you start thinking that way, that's when people get it and they're like, "Oh, yeah,
Mm.
like I don't want to have to saw to use a knife. Like if I could just have it move with my body." And we even like to joke about how do you Nulu because we designed it with multiple grips,
Mm.
not like multiple handles. When I say a grip, a way that you can engage it, but
Yeah.
you and I might use it completely differently. I would guess we're a different height, we're different musculature, we have
Mm-hmm.
different upper extremity issues. So what I use it for, you might look and go, "Wow, that's weird," but because it's basically you're thinking about angles. My wrist, if I've got wrist issues, I might have to hold it a certain way.
Right.
And the way we believe that things should be designed, a tool should adapt to you. When I talk
Oh.
to chefs
Yeah.
and they look at it, they kind of get it because a trained chef will hold a knife in like a pinch grip on the
Yeah.
spine of the knife forward of the handle. That makes no sense. You have a handle you're not using, and they use it for balance. So there's a lot of things where you look and you say, all this chef's training is great, but what you're doing is you're creating training and moving your body mechanics to align to a knife or a tool
Oh.
that is not designed with how your body works. Versus
Hmm.
you should be able to pick a tool like this up and use it without any thought. And our biggest obstacle is that people think too much. They should pick it up and say, what works? I'm going to use it that way.
I love this. And yeah, I love the explanation of we're not adapting to a tool gets to adapt to us and we get to use it effectively
Well,
for
and
our needs.
this is the lightning bolt kind of thing, right? You asked in the beginning creativity.
Yeah.
And it's always been our hope that our creativity allows people who may have limitations and other issues
Hmm.
be able to have their independence in the kitchen, which unlocks theirs, right? Because
Right.
people who have problems live in a world of limitations where they cannot express that creativity. But if you take away
Exactly.
that limitation, then they can do that. And that's our hope, right?
Yeah.
Because preparing a meal shouldn't be about technique, it should be about allowing you to release that creativity in a way that brings people together, which we
Hmm.
need these days. So, it's very it's nourishing to
Hmm.
be on an impactful side of you know, the private sector,
Yeah.
and being able to do that and use your creativity in a good manner.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, coming up with a new tool or anytime we're inventing or that innovation piece of it, I can only imagine how many iterations y'all went through to get to where you are today.
Yes.
So, walk us through a little bit, maybe not all of them, but a couple of the, you know, challenges you faced creating this product.
Well, and I'm going to preface this by, I think another thing that people need to to pair with creativity is humility,
Mm,
because we would have gone through limited iterations, because I would not have gotten off the ground without the team that I have, that all bring a different wisdom of what they've done. So my first partner, who I've got to get in front of more podcasts, because he's a brilliant guy,
hmm
and his creativity was very much rooted in reality. So
mm,
we went through less iterations than you would think, because I could bring this unbounded aspect and he could bring a focus.
hmm
So, I would say I went through maybe three, and then once we sort of dialed it in,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of prototyping after that. And I think
hmm
that's where it's really interesting, because I think if you really believe in the process of creating these things and you build the right team, it is releasing that so other people can bring their creative impulses and everything to that. And I remember this same partner once said, "How do you feel about the fact that, like, it may no longer be yours?" And I'm like, "When you all joined, it wasn't mine. My
Mm,
creativity ended at a certain point, to where then it
hmm
became the creativity, this amazing team." And if there's any entrepreneurs out there, they should be thinking in those terms, right? There is, I'm really addicted to a couple of podcasts right now, and one of them is Prof G, Scott Galloway, and he continually drives home success in the agency of others, which is what we learn at West Point. So
mm,
for me, that's been where it's releasing that, and then just standing back and watching the amazing what happens when you no longer try to control that. If you really think about it, trying to control a group creative process
Yeah.
is antithetical to actually releasing that creativity. So I think that's one thing
Absolutely.
people need to do.
Absolutely. I love that. Just that reminder that solo creativity transforms in a group and it becomes something else. And how do
Right.
we have, like you said, humility and the ability to allow for that expansion so
And
others.
I think it's about right. So I got into knife making from a hobby perspective, because I
hmm
needed a creative outlet, and for me it was rooted in practicality. So anything
hmm
that I make, where I made once this like barbecue knife where it's got like the hilt is like the face of a cow, right? And it's more art than function. And I think what's nice is, in my shop, and I would say entrepreneurs and creative people should have a place where they have unbridled, unlimited curiosity and
Yeah.
creativity, because then that allows them it allows them to bring a different tempered view. And I didn't mean to do that with the blade, but it was actually pretty good. A tempered view to like that professional creativity. So I can play around in my shop and scratch that itch and maybe think about things differently, and then bring a more practical creativity
hmm
that can make my business better, or relationships better, or all kinds of things, because I have a world where I can just create myself. And I think
Yeah.
that's really kind of an important thing too.
Absolutely. The kind of alone time where your imagination, curiosity gets to really be front and center,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
taking those pieces into a larger group or to community or relationship and
Well,
allowing it to change.
and in a way it's the purest creativity, right? Because if you're not planning, like my knives that I make in my garage,
hmm
people say, "Are you going to sell them?" I give them as gifts, because
Mm.
no one's ever going to tell you that it's ugly if it's a gift. But regardless of that, when you're not doing it for praise, or for like if there's an aspect of it being a totally for no reason other than creativity.
Right.
I think that it allows you to be, you're not as worried about what people will think.
Mm-hmm.
You're not focused on, can I sell this? It allows you to really, really completely open it up because it's
Yeah.
purely for you. And I think that that's a super important thing for people because I think a lot of people's creativity is there's a governor on it because they're worried about rejection or people will tell them
Mm-hmm.
it's stupid or whatever. And
Right.
people, you can create things just for yourself and never even show them to people and then
Yes.
do that. And I think that's an important part in the process. I'm different than that. I'll create stuff, oh, look what I made, right? And it's just fun for me, but not everyone's wired that way. And I think it's important that everybody have that outlet.
Absolutely. That experience of creative process over creative product. So we're
Yes.
allowing yourself to really be in the experience of development and creating and,
Well,
you
and
know,
if
we're
you were to
using
think
creating.
of where we're at, and I always think it from an entrepreneurial view, so like bringing something to market. So
Mm-hmm.
having the ability to go from creative ideation to maybe a practical
Mm-hmm.
prototype that you could put in front of people. But it goes beyond that. You could do it on a hobbyist side now, but we're in sort of a golden age of being able to explore creativity.
Right.
Up until there were, huge tariffs on everything, you could get things inexpensively and you still can in a relative manner, right? Like a lot of the tools I get, if I'm exploring, can I use this in my knife making? I'll go to Harbor Freight.
Mm.
Inexpensive. It's not a huge investment. I can try things out. But between AI, and computing power and 3D printing and availability
Mm-hmm.
of tools and all these things and the democratization of knowledge, right? Like YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like I have a love-hate relationship with social media and the internet, but you can go on YouTube and learn how to make something in a
Yeah.
day. You
Yeah.
got to put in the 10,000 hours. But generally, if I was like, hey, I want to make a particular kind of knife today,
Yeah.
I could go find someone who's done it. I could watch him do it and I could make one. So, for people out there listening to your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
to not do it and to only consume, and we're a
Mm.
very consumptive society, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of great stuff to stream and to watch, and there are algorithms out there in the attention economy that want your attention.
Right.
But on the other side of that, there are more resources that anybody has ever had to
Mm-hmm.
now be able to create things. And who knows, that knife was never created to start a company. And actually, once NULU started, we created Red Leg Innovation to bring other brands to market and hopefully help people also
Mm-hmm.
commercialize ideas. But the whole thought of is, well, how do I do it? If you wanted to even learn how to use a CAD pro, you could go to like an AI thing and say, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Right. And all of a sudden, this ability to do things. So I think for people not to be able to pursue their creative desires and instincts is a travesty. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's tragic that they've got this ability to do things now. And if they don't, it's sad.
I agree. Absolutely. It is a curious balance, but the idea of that we do live in this consumption time where we're taking in information, but we may not be actively using it in any way other than
Right.
just consuming the information. I'm so curious, when you think of your own creative experience, what's your earliest memory of being creative?
I was always, so if I go back to like elementary school, and so that would have been geez, like I graduated high school in '89, so you can do the math. I was in one of these gifted and talented programs, and what's interesting is I have an adult ADHD diagnosis.
Mhm.
Um, through the VA, which was kind of funny because I have a heart issue too, so I can't take ADHD medicine. So they're like, "Hey, you graduated from the academy and you got an MBA, so you're doing okay." But even as long as I can remember, I was sort of that non-traditional learner. I
Yeah.
was very hands-on, so it was always kind of what I did, and I did like more even in the military when we were out in the field. So I was
Mm.
lucky I never got I never had to fight in a war. I was deployed forward, but there was never a shooting match with it.
Mm.
And but I liked the creative process out in the field, like I was talking
Yeah.
about, right? Where, wow, we have a problem, and it was problem after problem after problem. So that's what's really drawn me to entrepreneurialism. But I think it's always been something that has been part of what I've done. And in fact, and there are people that would ding me on this, it was a detriment to me in corporate America. Because
Mm.
while I do feel that there was a golden age of corporate America, to use that terminology
Mm-hmm.
again, I feel it had become a risk averse place
Mm.
where creativity is the enemy of risk aversion, right? Because if you're creative, it's
Yeah.
like, can we do this a different way?
Right.
And it just seemed like everybody was more about, how do I make sure I go home without losing my job, because I want to make
Right.
sure I can pay my mortgage, right? And
Yeah.
and anything that you do that's going to be creative has the risk of being a big success or a big failure. And
Mm-hmm.
so I found it to be, creativity was rewarded within very, very, narrow band.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was to the detriment of corporate America. But that's why I've ended up where I am. So I think it's
Yeah.
always been present. It was very much subverted for a long time when I was in a more traditional corporate job.
That makes so much sense. It's so interesting how corporate America tends to squash creativity, but at the same time, in 2017, Forbes magazine came out and said creativity is the skill of the future. And so then every corporation was like, we have to have people who are creative, but we're not going to cultivate it and we're not going to allow it to be used in the structure that we
Right.
feel is the only way you can be in corporate America. So it's
Creative
so
creative
interesting.
people are really hard to lead, right?
Yes.
Creative people are, but this is where I think corporate America is getting a lesson in leadership versus management. When
Oh,
you have
yeah.
a risk averse culture, you want managers. They're going to do what you want them to do to the letter of
Mm-hmm.
how you want them to do it, and they're not going to color outside the lines. And that's why I think the startup world is really different, right? You're trying to find these creative people who you say, here's the command guidance, go solve the problem, don't get arrested or get me arrested, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think in the military, that's kind of how things operate, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You have good people, you push down as much autonomy as you can, and you allow people to do what they should be doing. So I think leadership is about saying, okay, this is the team that I have. How do I make this team, how do I win the pennant with this team? And
Right.
it's figuring out, wow, this person is really good in this area. They're a great problem solver here. And it could be realizing that creativity could be approaching logistical problem a certain way.
Yeah.
But frankly, I look at it, and again, I'm Generation X, and I'm really trying, as I'm starting to build these businesses, I really want to work with younger generations and cultivate their creativity, because I think when you hear the older generations argue about the younger generations, it's about the creativity argument, right?
Yeah.
It's not, there is some laziness things, but that's true with any generation.
Yeah.
But if you look at these kids and you're like, hey, we kind of screwed up a lot. Let's give them the ability to do some stuff. And it may be, again, go solve this logistical issue. We've got all the, go solve this. Tell me how to do it right. And we'll,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't enough of that out there.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the leadership versus management distinction and how how to work within someone's creative brilliance or creative expression and how leadership really is about cultivating that.
There's actually a really funny story about about the military.
Yeah.
And so I was end of the Cold War when the Soviets were the bad guys. And there was, and I don't know if it's true, but there was this lore, that, of course, the Russians, the Soviets had all of our manuals, but
Mm.
their fear about fighting us was we didn't follow any type of specific, we
Oh,
pushed down decision making and creativity down to NCO level, and
yeah.
some senior enlisted, and what that meant was there was an unpredictability because we could be creative with the times. And they're like, they just don't follow their manuals the same way. But
Right.
if you look at what's going on now, you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing what happens when you don't have that creativity pushed down. The reason that the Russians got bogged down is because they fight the way our corporate America works.
Ah,
And when you don't
interesting.
push down that creativity, people say, I'm not going to, if I do something wrong, who knows how that will turn out.
Right.
Right. So this is where it's just a different thinking, but
Yeah.
that has tended to guide some of my thinking as well.
That's so fascinating. And what you're saying speaks also to like the psychological safety to make a mistake and try something and risk something. And when that isn't there, you're really not going to get the creativity that you want
Right.
because no one's going to risk their job, career, etc. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well, this has been such a fantastic conversation. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Wow. You know what? It's really organic. Like
Mm.
I know when I've hit a certain thread. First thing, like I usually work with music and stuff in the back, and if I hit like this creative thing, like I don't even think about. So I'll notice, wow, I don't even have any background music because, like with the ADHD, a lot of times I need stuff in the back, but it's
Yeah.
sort of organic. I just let it go a lot more, and that is a newer direction, right? Because I think
Yeah.
I got past the self-consciousness of
Mm.
some of the creative process as I've gotten older, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
they talk about the sort of the over 50 being way you just give a crap less about what people think. And
Right.
I think that happened, but I don't think I think if you think about being creative, then all of a sudden you're not being creative anymore,
Ah,
right?
yes.
It's like really like living in the moment.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love the organic present moment experience. Absolutely. Well, for people who are interested in the work that you have out in the world, how could they go about finding you?
The best way to find me is you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. A lot of those will take you to my link tree, and I have there all of the links like to this podcast and everything else. So pretty easy. I've got a nice digital footprint. If they're wanting to know more about NULU,
Hmm.
NULUknives.com is our website. The Kickstarter has passed, so unless you're a backer, you can't get any information there. But again, you can find me. If they want to reach me, email, it's dkatz@goredleg.com. So dkatz@goredleg.com. Any military people out there will get it right. I was an artillery officer, so they wore red pants back in the day when cannons looked like what people think cannons look like. So, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but this is being recorded. Well, as it's being recorded, we expect to have inventory in mid-May. So we could be up and running well into when this airs. So go to newluknives.com and buy knives. If it's earlier than that, we are taking pre-sale.
Perfect. Well, I will put links in show notes so people have easy access. And thank
Awesome.
you so much, Doug, for taking the time to chat with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
No, you know what? I love to get out there and talk about this. If I can help anybody, I think that's what we're here to do. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.